Lower.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm supposed to introduce you.
Yes. I've been introducing all day. I'll behave the rest of the time, I promise.
Right. Hi, everyone. I am Adoria Williams. I am the library director at Merritt College in Oakland, California. And we are here today to hear a wonderful presentation led by Anita Crawley and Megan. I'm sorry, Megan, I don't know how to say this last name. Megan, Stephanie, you are both going to provide this wonderful presentation on engaging in institutional change for DEI beyond the classroom. So take it away.
Welcome, everybody. We're going to do a real quick introduction. I'm Anita Crawley. I'm a consultant focusing on equity and online learning and student support, working at Harper College. Megan?
I am Megan Dallianis. I'm at Harper College, currently in the Associate Dean of Interdisciplinary Student Success and Studies. And I work really closely with our diversity programming, social justice, and global scholars programming.
Hello, everyone. I just moved to California in June in 2022 to take on this new position. So I'm Assistant Provost for Faculty Affairs, Development, and Diversity at Palo Alto University.
To give you an overview of what we're doing during this session, we're going to make the case that creating one course, Diversity 101, which Stephanie and I did almost 30 years ago, which is a little hard to believe, can lead to all sorts of unanticipated outcomes, not just for the students who've taken the course, but also for the institution where it's being taught. Megan's going to share some student data and also talk about other initiatives at Harper that diversity is a part of. And then Stephanie and I are going to talk about the impact that creating that course has had on us professionally and personally, and then we'll leave some time at the end for questions.
Okay, so I'll start and give a little bit of context around why we did the course that so many 30 years ago. So the idea for developing the course came about after Anita and I attended a conference at Parkland College in Illinois. Scholars in multicultural education were keynote speakers, and it was a variety of different sessions on all kinds of diversity or social justice types of issues at this conference. And so one of the keynote speakers was Dr. James Banks. You may be very much familiar with him and does a lot of work around multicultural education, but also Myra and David Sadker has done a lot of research around gender and gender bias in the classroom. So we went back to our campus, went back to Harper College, truly inspired to think about ways that we could facilitate change around issues of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. So we started to brainstorm. We brainstormed several ideas, and then we settled on designing a credit course that would count towards the associate degrees. Anita and I both love to teach. One of the reasons why we're in higher education, and there are other courses that were taught through in our student development division, but we didn't have anything that specifically focused on diversity at that time. And so we wanted the course to be unique. We knew that topics around, stereotypes, prejudice, discrimination, those types of things are taught, a lot in other fields like in sociology. And so we knew that we had to think of a way to make this course different or special or unique. And so one thing that we did, we definitely talked a lot about doing some experiential learning, right? We didn't want students just to hear and get lectured about what prejudice is or what discrimination is or what it looks like on campus. We also wanted to add the experiential part to it, where they did a variety of different activities and things in the course. But the other thing that Anita and I did is that we argued that the course should be team taught. And we really wanted, instructors that came from different backgrounds to be able to teach the course. Because like, look, we come to this different walks of life. We have different experiences, points of views, but we feel, we have this goal and we care about this particular course and we want to do this together. And we talked about, our different identities right up front as part of this course. So students know, like, we're comfortable about, who we are. We're going to put that out there and trying to make that a comfortable space for students as well. So we designed the course and vetted it with our dean at the time and our colleagues, and continue to push the course through the institutional level approval process. We had to go through different departments to get support, so when we went there with the committee, that we kind of knew our votes walking in. And so the course was actually taught for the first time, that at least what I have in my, I had to go back and look at my Vita. The first time I remember teaching the course was spring in 2000. So I'll turn it over to you, Anita.
Thank you. So I always thought it was a few years before that. That's interesting. Okay. So I had an opportunity this weekend to talk to a friend and colleague of ours that was there at Harper during this period of time, and also is currently working there and teaching Diversity 101. And so it was just really interesting to learn more about what's happened over the last 20 years it's been. So the course focuses on culture and other diversity issues and topics. The teaching method is, as Stephanie and I conceived of years ago, that it be interactive, personal development focused, and the students discuss dimensions of their own culture and the culture of others in the United States. They have the opportunity to examine discrimination and prejudice between groups and analyze the impact of these power differences on people's lives. So some of the topics, as you would imagine, are oppression based on race, religion, ethnicity, ability, gender, sex, sexual orientation, and more. But it continues to be experiential. And it gives the opportunity for students to develop skills that are necessary to interact effectively in a diverse society. Unfortunately, Stephanie and I left shortly thereafter, and very quickly it no longer became team taught, which I think we both grieved it, because it was so powerful for us to teach it together. One of my most favorite activities was we created some questions, and I brought the white students into one room, and Stephanie led the students of color to answer these questions. And then we brought the two groups together, and they shared answers, then they shared impressions, and it was incredibly powerful. One interesting thing I found out over the weekend is there are online sections of the course, which is very interesting to me. So Megan, tell us what's happening at Harper now.
So Diversity 101 is still thriving at Harper. We continue to offer it every semester. Stephanie and Anita built such a strong foundation for the course, and topics have evolved. What's nice about this course is there is flexibility built in as things are happening culturally in the country. Topics, stay on the pulse of what's occurring. But one of the things that I wanted to also point out is we've seen some really strong course success compared to overall success at Harper. So you can see here, it's a little bit small, but the percentages of course success are consistently higher when compared to general classes at Harper. If you go to the next slide. We're also seeing greater persistence rates from students who take diversity. So we're seeing that this course is having an overall impact on students' persistence, which I think is really compelling. I think this course, because of the passion and the community that's built within the courses, because it is so discussion based, they are touching on uncomfortable topics at time, but I think there is that growth that occurs in that almost like level of bonding, where we're seeing a sense of belonging, community building that's leading to those higher persistence rates. We have pretty strong numbers as far as the number of students that are enrolled each semester. And Anita, if you want to go to the next slide. We have embedded Diversity 101 within a broader social justice studies program. So it's a foundation course. If students take 12 credit hours of courses that have been redesigned with an overarching social justice studies theme, they can earn a graduation distinction around social justice. And we're seeing that courses that have that social justice theme built within it, they're focusing on civic engagement, calls for service. So again, really engaging, really discussion-based, really in tune with what's going on in the country at a given time. We're seeing higher rates of engagement, higher rates of success. But this has been a really strong vehicle for Diversity 101. But students are also packaging together other general education requirements that have that theme. Like, for example, our Bio 102, which is Plants and Society course, studies the botanical nature, history, environmental impact, public policy, and then social disparities contextualized with what's going on with cannabis currently. So they're looking at like the war on drugs and decriminalization of cannabis, policy reform, racial justice. So the Diversity 101 course really kicks it off. It helps students feel uncomfortable in the uncomfortable nature of these topics and these conversations, and then they continue to dive deeper as they're taking the rest of their social justice studies courses. So this is a newer program. What's nice is that students don't necessarily have to commit to the full 12 credit hours of social justice courses to receive the graduation distinction. If that doesn't work for their educational plan, or they want to like dip their toe into these conversations, they could choose to take like just the diversity course. They could take the English 101 that has a social justice theme. So it's really one of those things that we have a lot of students that are participating in, and we're hoping to grow the overall program that's with that greater commitment of the 12 credit hours. There's also a capstone class that includes a service project that we just got passed through curriculum. So we're really excited about that as well. But again, Stephanie and Anita did a really great job in creating the foundation, which is that Diversity 101 course. And we're continuing to build on that.
Thank you so much. That's pretty much music to my ears to hear that. So one of the things that we wanted to talk about was what impact did this have on I'm going to talk about what the impact it had on me professionally and personally. And of course, it's hard to measure. This is one event. I can't isolate or measure exactly what developing the course with Stephanie, the impact it had, but it definitely changed who I am and what I do. And I wanted to share some of that with you. Stephanie mentioned seeing James Banks at Parkland College. I have a shirt that I still have, so I know that was in 1993 because the shirt tells me so. And we were inspired by what we learned. It was a statewide conference, and it was aptly named "Getting Down to Business: Making Gender Balanced Multicultural Education a Reality in Illinois Schools." And both of us are being action-oriented. We knew we had to do something. Now, this morning I woke up and thought it wasn't the course that began this. It was another project that preceded the course. We called it curriculum infusion. You remember? And I mean, we've been talking about this for a couple of weeks doing the presentation, but it it just jumped in my brain this morning. So we came back from that first conference and had our student development colleagues look at their courses and encourage them to examine the courses, the sections they taught for images and course materials. Were they homogeneous or did they represent folks from diverse backgrounds? I can't remember all that the project entailed, but I do remember that we presented it at a national conference. Then we went to a second conference at Western, right? And that's when I think we came up with the course idea. I can't remember it exactly. Tell me if your recollection is different. But we came back, and that's when we looked for support from the multicultural committee. Stephanie was the chair, and student development to create the diversity course. And as Stephanie mentioned, usher it through curriculum and get support from the departments where we shared some topics. So we co-taught the course for a couple of semesters, and then I got distracted. I got distracted by the latest, brightest, shiny object, online learning, right? And so in 1999, I created and taught my first online course, which I guess now it would be called a hybrid course. But for the next several years, online instruction and online student support consumed all of my attention. And those of us with white skin privilege can make those choices. Step away, step back. And that wasn't the first time I did it. I was an activist in college, and then I was not. And again, early in my career, I was a social worker working on all sorts of programs serving people of color. And then I stepped away from that too. So it's a pattern. And I think it's important for me to reflect on what that means to me, and I have. In 2013, shortly after I moved back home to California, I attended a presentation by Angelus and Caroline Haskell, who had just published a book called Combined Destinies, Whites Sharing Grief About Racism. I followed them around the county. I kept going to their presentations, and at one point I just simply introduced myself as a groupie. So they were doing the work that I wanted to be doing, and that resulted in an invitation to the inaugural meeting of a community group that became Whites for Racial Equity. It's an affiliate of SURGE, Showing Up for Racial Justice, which is a national organization. So we meet monthly as a white affinity group. We educate ourselves, we take action, we support organizations led by people of color. And then we have other activities that we do, like book and movie discussions and panel presentations where everybody's welcome. But I've made a real commitment to be involved not only in professionally, but in my community in equity and inclusion work. One of the skills, for example, that I picked up along the way in my career was web development. I've never been paid to do it, but I don't have a lot of patience. So if sitting in an IT queue was never I just learned the skills. So anyway, so I've offered that as a volunteer at several organizations, including the NAACP in Monterey County, where I'm currently on the executive committee. And then I also serve as the civil rights commissioner in my district. So what started out as two projects at Harper has really led to some incredibly enriching experiences for me. So I want to also talk a little bit about my relationship with Stephanie. That was personally the most important thing that I got from developing the course. We've stayed in contact with each other throughout the years, even though, as Stephanie mentioned, until a year ago, we've lived thousands of miles apart. You can kind of imagine what the conversation was on the phone when she told me she's accepted the job. I mean, you would need earplugs. I was pretty excited. So clearly our experiences in the 90s working on the curriculum and developing the course and participating in the multicultural committee has informed really the remainder of my professional and personal life. But there's one more impact that I wanted to share with you because it's really important to me. So Stephanie is one of several friends of mine who are Black, Asian, or Latino. Some are gay, some are straight, and most, but not all, are currently able-bodied. And what I wanted to share is when I read or hear or see the terror that's perpetuated against people who are part of a non-dominant group in our society, it's personal to me. I mean, I feel the pain. I can't entirely feel the experience of another, of course, but the pain is real. And I know a lot of people are just paralyzed by how horrible everything is. But to me, the way I get around it is I take action. And I think the reason why I want to talk in this group about this is because I want to encourage all of you as faculty or working in higher ed or whatever organization you work for, is to get deeply involved in making equity, diversity, and inclusion part of all parts of your life. For sure, it's going to improve your course design, and you will absolutely create online courses or on-ground courses that are more inclusive learning environments for all of your students. All of this is super important. But I think my message is that I've gained so much more than I've given. And it's really important to me.
Mhm.
Stephanie, your turn.
Okay. Yeah, can go to the next slide, please.
Sure will.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think, thinking about this, it was definitely fun to kind of sit back and think about where I was in my career and personally during the time. I just remember a lot of excitement around doing this type of work. And anybody can tell you doing this type of work, if you're not careful, you can get really tired, you can wear yourself out, right? Wear yourself out for doing this. And as Anita mentioned, at Harper at that time, I was appointed to be the chair of the multicultural committee of our very first one, right? So I wasn't asked. I was the dean, of course, and of course I was honored that the dean thought that I could, step into this leadership role. But next thing I know, I was doing I was chairing a multicultural committee, and we were all, all of a sudden then we were doing training for all faculty, right? And we were in student development at the time. And so I think, definitely doing the work of designing a course was definitely the next step and made sense. And so for me, it definitely was the springboard for me going and pursue an EDD. So I was very much looking for at that time, what is the best way that I can make an impact on students' lives, right? For, in higher ed, that's my main, right? That's my audience. I want to make sure that I can have some type of impact in their lives. And so, I was a counselor at that time, teaching, chairing the multicultural committee. I was also doing work. That's where I started doing work around faculty development as well. And so I ended up, I got to the point where I was like, I really would like to know how the curriculum, the pedagogy, what we're doing in this course really does make an impact. Can we somehow do that? So that was really, it really was a springboard for me and go and pursue an EDD in social justice education at the University of Massachusetts. And so my dissertation focused on courses there that doctoral students taught, and that we it was similar to Diversity 101, but the same thing. We talked about the isms. That was what the course was, and so I was able to use that as my lab and do my dissertation and my research for, on that topic and really focusing around social action engagement. I was really wanting to know, what motivated students if they decided to take, to engage in social action, and then what things in the course they felt like really, had an influence on them about that. And so I really, was excited about doing that, learning more about that. And it really, once again, then I continued and then went and of course, pursued a faculty position and continued to have, my faculty position, I was training teachers. So I was a teacher educator. And so I taught multicultural education and was really trying to work with teachers, trying another way to impact their students and teaching and training them on how to infuse multiculturalism, social justice education into what they taught. And I have to say, it was probably one of the toughest things I ever had to do, right? Because there's a lot of resistance, pushback, and even anybody that's in teacher ed knows there's so much control over what can be taught at schools. And we know what's happening in different states, books being removed, things like that. But really trying to work up against that. And so as my one of my professors said in the EDD program, that she did her activism in the classroom, right? So I have always carried that and continue to do that in my faculty role, but also using and publishing the research for my dissertation and additional research around the curriculum and pedagogy to also try to inform the literature on social justice education, and also written a co-edited book. What about teaching these topics, right? Teaching, but talking about how faculty have collaborated across fields to do this work. And then of course, also my service, but and service, one of the things that I think I'm definitely proudest about, because it was, everything is about how do I make an impact? How do I make an impact beyond just in the classroom? But so another way of doing that was being a part of a partnership with an elementary school. Once again, thinking about how I can work with them to infuse this topic, talking about social justice in their classrooms, and just developing partnerships and in and around the around Fairfield University at that time is where I was as a faculty member. And so I, I think Anita was talking a little bit about this as far as being able to walk away from it. I think I've always felt like I couldn't walk away from it. Like that was less of a choice. So even when, Anita mentioned this at Harper, there was a point where Anita was like, Stephanie, as she was saying, I really want to pursue this online stuff. I really can't team teach with you. So I was kind of like, all right, what do? I got to go find somebody else, whatever. But I felt like I couldn't walk away at that point. Like, right. Like if I'm not going to do it, who's going to do it? And so, and other, folks of color or other people that from other marginalized groups might feel they have that same thing. Like, if I don't do it, who's going to do it? And so, but once I got to this faculty position, I really didn't want to be pigeonholed, but I'm so committed and passionate about the work. I felt like I couldn't, like it always had to be a strand, right? Or a theme in the work that I do. And so while I was in this faculty position, after I got tenure, and that's I could do a whole presentation about the tenure process and being person of color. I mean, that's just a whole nother, thing. But, and I have, and so, afterwards, I was tapped to be associate dean in the School of Education and Human Development at Fairfield University. And I did that for 5 years. But once I was in that role and said yes to that, I'm like, how can I continue to have an impact around DEIB, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, as an associate dean, because now I'm communicating with all, with all faculty in the school, not just the faculty and the students that are part of my department. So I ended up starting the first equity and inclusion committee that our school ever had. And that was recent. I mean, I was like, really, I can't believe we don't have this. But even our own university at the time didn't even have a university-wide committee. And we definitely didn't have a chief diversity officer. And so for me, who's been doing this work for so long, it was like very disappointing about where some places are still at this point at 2023. And so I started the first diversity committee doing work in my school. But the exciting thing about that is other schools on our campus develop diversity committees afterwards. And they just hired their first chief diversity officer who's going to start in the fall. So this person's coming in with diversity committees in every school at the university. So I feel really happy about that to make sure. But also I did, as associate dean, a lot of faculty retreats. And I'm like, hey, if I'm gonna do these faculty retreats, they're focusing on diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and around teaching and things like that as much as possible. So I continue to do that, integrating that work with faculty development. And so it brings me to where, to where I am now. This role, this role that I'm doing now as assistant provost, the reason I love it so much and applied for it and decided to do it is because it has the two strands in it. So, as you saw at the beginning when we introduced ourselves, I got my three buckets of faculty affairs, faculty development, and diversity. And so, once again, doing this work, most of my, some of my work will be faculty facing around DEIB, but also institutional level. For example, at Palo Alto University, for faculty to serve on a search committee, and this is for staff as well, there is mandatory inclusive search training. And so I partner with the director of human resources to facilitate that training. Once faculty and staff go through that training, they're certified to be on a search committee for 2 years, and then the training would happen again. And I like that approach because I've seen over my 30 years in higher ed that there's too many one and done type of processes around DEIB. And so, I'm partnering with human resources to do that now, but also the diversity work. The Center for Teaching, the director reports to me. So definitely using our Center for Teaching as another way to continue to do education with faculty and staff and students as well. So, sharing all of this to say that, yes, we can make an impact in a course, and we don't know all the ways that we make an impact, but we definitely, and we're in really privileged positions to be able to take this work outside of the classroom, outside of our departments, our universities, our colleges, into the community. I think that's what we're really trying to show here, and I think we all know there's a lot of work to do, right? This is not going to end anytime soon, but there's plenty of work to do. And I hope that our stories can be inspiration to you all to think about the different ways that you can make an impact doing this work out within the classroom and outside of the classroom. So I will stop there. One other thing, true, that we're also, that I want to share with you all, at my current institution, they had an equity and inclusion committee before I came there. And then I guess it had just started right before COVID. And then when COVID happened, which I think has happened at other institutions, the work of that E&I committee kind of waned, right? And so the two people that were co-chairing it were doing all the work. And so the president has now asked me to chair a working group, do some research with some people, and to begin to think about what do we do with this institutional level committee? And so, as I said, the work continues, but thank you all for listening, and hopefully that was helpful for people. So I know at this point, I don't think we have any other slides. The next slide was more about questions, right? If people had any questions about anything. Okay. All right. So any questions for us?
You can unmute yourselves and ask questions if you prefer not to take the time to type them in the chat.
I'm going to stop sharing it so we can do gallery.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Jeanette.
No questions? None?
Any thoughts?
Oh, I see a hand. Go for it, Laura.
Question. So I'm wondering about the best way to incentivize faculty and other people to go through these kinds of professional development opportunities. Like, have you found, like, I'm finding the best way to incentivize it, you have a core group of people that are really excited about it, and they'll take advantage of every professional development opportunity like this. But for the others, it seems like money is not the only, but one of the best ways to incentivize it. Are there other methods that you found successful?
Well, what we're doing, so we, through our Center for Teaching, we're at PAU, we have two departments. We have psychology and we have counseling. And so for this evidence-based teaching conference series that we're doing right now, where the majority of it focuses on DEI issues, faculty can apply for CEUs. And so we find that that's something that's definitely been helpful and in our process to kind of incentivize faculty too. But another way that I would talk about is when faculty submit their faculty activity reports yearly, and also when they apply for promotion or tenure, they have to talk about how their work reflects the inclusive excellence framework that we've adopted as a university. So as a matter of fact, before this meeting today, I met with the provost and the department chair of one of the areas, and we talked about that topic, like, okay, so how are our faculty doing? Are there areas that we can help them in? And so to try to offer those things that we know that, that maybe faculty may struggle in. But the incentivize, yeah, we're always looking for different ways to do that. We don't really, another way that I try to incentivize faculty is by highlighting faculty, right? So the faculty that are doing the work, right? We highlight them in the newsletter from the Center for Teaching. We also ask them to do some of the training sessions. I'm gonna tell you, I've never had a faculty member turn me down when I went and sent them a personal invitation and say, I hear that you do this really well. Would you mind sharing that? Even if it's just like an activity in their classroom, would you mind doing a session for our Center for Teaching for that? That is probably my thing that works the most, is the best for me really in the long run, is personal invitations and saying, hey, and spotlighting the work that faculty do.
Excellent, thank you.
Any other questions? Well, I would like to thank you for presenting today. This was really good stuff. You all are working hard. And you know what? It's paying off. So that's the plus side of it all. So thank you for letting us glimpse what you do. And we hope to take away what we can and apply it at our own institutions. That was really wonderful.
Thank you. We also have fun, by the way.
Oh, it looks like it.
Oh, we do. I also wanted to encourage people to come to Stephanie Whalen's session tomorrow. She's going to talk about some other things that are happening at Harper. that are really exciting for course development and tracking skill building and just some neat stuff is happening. So do make sure you see that, either if you have a conflict with the recording of it or
Yes.
live.
The recordings will be posted on the Equity Team's YouTube page. And we're going to fix the transcripts before we do so. But everything will be there. So if you miss it, and hopefully you won't miss it live, you can check out the recording later. So I also want to urge you all to take a look at us on social media. We are on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. We need to get on TikTok, but we will get there. And thank you for coming. I will end the presentation by stopping the recording.
Thank you.
Guys, that was